citizens equal. To understand how we got here, we need to take a look at the evolution of the juvenile justice system. Back before the American Revolution, the colonies followed the common law of England when it came to criminal justice. This means that children were held accountable as adults. In 1646, Puritans in Massachusetts enacted a statute called the Stubborn Child Law. This made child disobedience a capital offense, allowing a death penalty option. But then things started to change. In the 19th century, the idea emerged that children should be taken care of by the state. This notion ultimately empowered the state to serve as a guardian. In 1825, the New York House of Refuge opened for juveniles only. They were called delinquents to distinguish them from criminals. Reformers stressed that delinquents could be reformed, and if properly supported, they wouldn't turn into lifelong criminals. In 1899, Chicago reformers, also known as child savers, many of them disenfranchised women, decided to fight for the defenseless. One reformer, Lucy Flower, had been an orphan herself. The child savers pushed for the creation of the first ever juvenile court. This wasn't like a regular court. There was no jury. The judge didn't look down from a bench, but sat at a desk. Julian Mack, one of the first such judges, said a kid should be made to feel that he is the object of its care and solicitude. This court was the first of its kind anywhere in the world. Kids didn't get prison time, but instead were put in institutions or programs. Like parents, the court tried to steer kids toward becoming responsible adults. Within 25 years, most states started to think the same thing. Juvenile courts popped up everywhere, even in other countries. But for children of color, things were different. They were sometimes banned from houses of refuge or juvenile detention centers, and when convicted, they were more likely to be placed in adult prisons. Under Jim Crow laws, some cities like Memphis established separate juvenile courts for kids of color. A police officer, not a judge, presided over this court. After World War II, Americans seemed to relish the concepts of liberty and justice. The civil rights movement was well underway. Activists began to realize that while juvenile courts were designed to be less punitive, they didn't provide the constitutional rights enjoyed by adults. In 1967, for instance, 15-year-old Gerald Galt was accused of making an indecent phone call to a neighbor. Gerald was arrested without anyone informing his parents. No record was made of his appearance before a judge or the neighbor who complained. Gerald was committed to a state school until he was 21. An adult with the same charge might have received a $50 fine and 2 months incarceration. Gerald's parents brought his case to the Supreme Court. In 1967, that august body ruled that juveniles were entitled to due process. Then in the 70s, America started rethinking its criminal justice system. Crime had spiked, including juvenile crime. And in 1978, New York City passed the Juvenile Offender Act, a law that made it possible to try kids as young as 13 in adult court for murder charges and as young as 14 for other violent crimes like assault and robbery. That law caused states across the country to reinterpret who could enter the prison system as an adult. They were afraid that a new breed of super predators would sweep over the nation. Today, America incarcerates more juveniles than any country in the world. Every day, 53,000 children are locked up. That's more than a sold-out crowd at a Major League Baseball game. Nearly 60% of these children are Black or Latinx. Today, certain rights like the Sixth Amendment and the right to a speedy trial or a trial by jury remains only applicable to adults. Advocates have succeeded in getting almost all states to raise the age at which you are considered an adult to 18. But if you commit certain severe crimes, you can still be tried as an adult in the adult court and serve adult time. Citizens equal. To understand how we got here, we need to take a look at the evolution of the juvenile justice system. Back before the American Revolution, the colonies followed the common law of England when it came to criminal justice. This means that children were held accountable as adults. In 1646,
Tonight,
Puritans in Massachusetts
me and
enacted a
Cornell, we
statute
will be
called the
talking
Stubborn
about
Child
what's
Law.
wrong
This made child
with
disobedience a capital offense,
the
allowing
United
a death penalty option.
States
But then
justice
things
system.
started to
We
change.
will be
In the
focusing
19th
the
century, the idea
juvenile
emerged that
system
children
in
should
the
be
United
taken
States
care of by the
began
state.
in
This notion ultimately
1899
empowered the
with
state
the
to serve as a
establishment of
guardian.
the
In
first
1825, the New York House
juvenile
of
court
Refuge opened
in
for
Chicago,
juveniles only.
Illinois.
They were called delinquents to
The
distinguish them
juvenile
from
system
criminals. Reformers
is a
stressed
separate
that
system
delinquents could be reformed,
of
and if
criminal
properly
justice for
supported,
children
they
who
wouldn't
committed
turn into
crimes.
lifelong
It was
criminals.
based on
In
the idea that
1899,
children
Chicago
So tonight we will be focusing on the juvenile system. Cornell, how are you doing this evening?
Man, I'm doing great, man. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Well, yes, ma'am. Thank you for welcoming me, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I would like to say that, this is a good topic tonight because it deals with something that state law meant to adjust the criminal, related to the juvenile system, which is a civil matter process. So with that being said, ma'am, I would like to, say thank you very much for having me on, man, so to talk about these issues, man.
You're welcome. So, Angela, we have another clip. Are you
In November and December 1865, shortly after the end of the Civil War, Southern states sought to control their large populations of newly freed black people. Laws were passed authorizing the arrest and jailing of blacks. These laws became known as Black Codes. They typically applied only to blacks and criminalized acts that were not offenses when committed by whites. On November 24, 1865, Mississippi passed a Black Code declaring that all freedmen, free Negroes, and mulattoes found without proof of employment or found unlawfully assembling themselves would owe up to $50 in fines and serve up to 10 days in jail. As a result of Black Codes, the post-Civil War era brought American black citizens more contact with the criminal courts and prison systems than ever before. As the former Confederacy learned to use the criminal justice system as a tool of racial control, countless black men, women, and children were convicted and sentenced under unjust laws that criminalized them for existing as free black citizens. In November and December 1865,
okay? So that was
shortly
something
after
that
the end of the Civil War,
I didn't
Southern
know
states
that
sought to control
that
their
this
large
was Black
populations
Code.
of newly freed black people. Laws were
Cornell,
passed authorizing the arrest.
Ma'am?
did
Not, ma'am, but speaking of that, we were talking about the ratio of the African Americans and Hispanics and the white individuals who were subject to juvenile convictions here in the United States, ma'am. percentages of the ratio of the juveniles convicted here in the United States. If I'm not mistaken, earlier you said that 50% of African Americans were convicted, under the juvenile statutes here in the United States, and that 45% of whites were convicted here in the United States, and that 4% of Hispanics were convicted in the juvenile facilities, according to the United States Conviction Code.
Yes.
And to understand the juvenile process, ma'am, a juvenile is classified as a delinquent, as mentioned earlier. And because a juvenile is classified as a delinquent, they are not classified as being responsible for the conduct of their actions until they reach a certain age. In some states, it's 20, and some are. But here in Texas, you're at 18, you can buy a gun at 18. But they are now trying to change the laws to 21 years of age. Still, in the criminal justice system, a juvenile is not responsible for their actions until they reach that certain age. So if a juvenile commits a criminal offense, and that criminal offense is considered a heinous offense, as opposed like a capital murder or a murder with an aggravating element, then that juvenile will be classified as to be able to stand trial as an adult court. But the process to this is that the juvenile have to go through what we call a civil proceeding, which is under the juvenile certification process. With that being said, a juvenile justice judge has to make an order to determine to a psychologist whether or not the juvenile individual delinquent is sophisticated enough to understand the nature and the consequences of their actions during the time and the commission of that offense. In some cases, psychologists take a child into a room and do what they call a psychological evaluation. They ask a few questions. Psychological evaluation also includes certain information related to them from the family, like, how did the child grow up in his household, other mitigating factors, or their sexual abuse in the process, and things of this nature. Well, in some cases, these doctors are classified to certify these children as adults, and they'll send that information to the trial court judge or the juvenile judge. And with that, juvenile judges are certifying these kids to stand trial as adults. But what has turned out is the fact that a lot of these juveniles are being influenced by adults to commit these crimes. And with that being said, the certification psychologist is not considering the fact that a lot of juveniles are being influenced by outside influences to commit crimes. So when they are being certified like this, ma'am, that's taken away from the real factors to whether or not to say that that child understood exactly what they were doing, but they're being influenced by someone else. Therefore, the certification process is an illegal process. Why? Because the psychologist is not being allowed to testify in court as to how they came to their decisions in order to determine the fifth state enough and gain the culpable mental state to understand what they were doing now.
Okay.
So with this being said, our juvenile system is unconstitutional.
Yes. And also you had touched on some that the juveniles, some of the juveniles that get cases are influenced by other people. There was a case, Rupert versus Simmons. You can Google that, Rupert versus Simmons. I just found out about that case. It was a young man. He influenced someone younger than him to go rob this lady. To rob the lady, he had it all planned out how he wanted to do, it was supposed to get dead. So they went exactly and they did it. The young man, the older guy, I believe he was 17 at the time of his conviction, and the younger one was 15. I believe the younger one got life and the older one got the death penalty. Well, the older one fought it. He took it all the way to the Supreme Court and he won it. And that's how the death penalty came off the table. They couldn't sentence the youth with the death penalty anymore. In that case, it was the Supreme Court in 2005 decided in Rupert versus Simmons, and juvenile execution in the United States. The courts ruled that the United States Constitution protects people from being sentenced to death of a crime committed when they are under the age of 18. So, but since that went into effect, Texas had executed 22 youth, and I seen their ages. They was youth, and then some was executed at the age of 24. They was all in their 20s when they was executed, but 22 youth was executed. Texas being the number one, Virginia and Oklahoma. Each one of them had they executed youth, but now it's life in prison. Um, no more execution. But I think I need to do a little more research in statistics. The number one people, African American juveniles, the Hispanic juveniles, then the white juveniles, and then the other juveniles. So I looked at it like, and Cornell, tell me if I'm wrong, that even when I looked at the statistics in the juvenile system, that African Americans and Latinos are the number ones in the juvenile and in adult system.
You're correct, ma'am, on that. According to statistics, ma'am, African Americans make up 7-1 to white. Okay, Hispanic makes up 5-1 to white in the criminal justice system. With that being said, in our criminal justice juvenile system, ma'am, African Americans are being, certified at a rate more higher than any other nationality in the United States now. And then not only that, why? Because a lot of times African Americans run in groups. And this is where the Texas law parties here in the state of Texas comes in at. And then not only that, in the United States, anybody can be convicted of a crime if you are a party to a crime, or if you acted in conjunction with the commission of a crime. Here in Texas, the United States Supreme Court ruled in Stewart stating that the anticipation of a juvenile to commit a capital crime is unconstitutional. Why? Because the juvenile could not have been convicted under criminal liability. Now, here in the state of Texas, how they're getting away with these juvenile certification convictions is the fact that the district court do not have to identify who committed the offense. All they have to do is label everybody criminally responsible for the conduct of another. So with this being said, ma'am, it's thousands and thousands of juveniles in our criminal justice systems, ma'am, convicted under a theory called the Texas law parties or the law parties. So in some cases, accessory before the fact or after the fact. So because this is a theme in our criminal justice system, ma'am, Texas is wrestling and trying to figure out how to fix it. Well, we got a case right now, ma'am, where the Eighth Amendment is being placed upon the table. The Eighth Amendment is classified as a cruel and unusual punishment for a juvenile to be convicted to an automatic life sentence. It has been noted that a juvenile has not lived out a capital life sentence, nor has any juvenile made parole from a capital life sentence of mandatory 40 years. So right now, that issue is on the table. But they're still wrestling with trying to figure out how to fix the juvenile certification law. Why? Because a lot of juvenile certification records are being lost and destroyed. And with this being said, a lot of juveniles now are not allowed to go back and obtain records to challenge the certification process. And now, with that being said, ma'am, here it is, our legislators are not even paying attention to the fact that with the juvenile cannot secure their certification records to prove that the psychologist used false information to certify them. These kids are in our criminal justice system being forced to serve out a mandatory 40 years for a crime that most of them did not commit, especially under the Texas law parties here in the state of Texas. or in the law party process now?
You know, we tell you was talking about the Eighth Amendment, and Netflix was showing a documentary on amendments, which I highly suggest that everyone, if you can, if you have, go over to Netflix and watch the documentary. They have it on YouTube as well. But here I'm thinking the Eighth Amendment. Everyone I don't talk to, they was saying that the Eighth Amendment was violated. They said that 14, and they also gave me another amendment. Cornell, this is my opinion, and I want you to chime in to it as well. From where, after talking to each one of these men and doing research and listening to the history and everything of how the juvenile system came around and the clauses that they still had in there hidden for the African American man. To me, this is my opinion, the amendments do not work for our men. The Eighth Amendment, the 14th Amendment, if you go, when you read, when you see what they said, what they pointed out, that when slavery was ended, when the amendments was drafted up, that it was a clause left in, I believe it was the 14th Amendment. And to me, though that clause is what keeps our black men, our black women, our brothers, our brown brothers and sisters keeping behind that bar. Be, because of that, because of the clause that they have in it. Can you touch on the Eighth Amendment, on some of the amendments?
Okay, man. Well, let's touch on the amendments. Okay, you have the Fourth, the Fifth, Sixth, the Eighth, and the 14th Amendment. The Fourth Amendment is blank. That's the investigation process. Well, here it is. A lot of juveniles are being questioned without the presence of parents and without the presence of an attorney. Okay, the Fifth Amendment is the right to remain silent, man. Okay, and the Sixth Amendment is the right to representation of an attorney. Okay, now here in the United States, they call the Eighth Amendment. The Eighth Amendment applies to adults under the double jeopardy standard. Okay, the Eighth Amendment applies to juveniles because of a juvenile shall not be certified to stand trial as an adult or convicted for a capital automatic life sentence. And they're saying that the Eighth Amendment is unconstitutional, being applied unconstitutionally to juveniles. And all of these amendments are incorporated into the 14th Amendment, which is the due process and equal protection of the law. That means that no person shall be deprived of due process without protection of the law. And it provides this process of the juvenile system of kids being certified to stand trial as an adult without the proper proceedings of being them. Thousands and thousands of kids are being wrongfully incarcerated for crimes they did not commit. Why? Because of the simple fact that the Eighth Amendment is being violated. The cruel and unusual punishment. Now, you cannot execute a mentally retarded individual. Okay? Nor can you execute a child who doesn't have the capacity of understand rationale of what they're doing. So with this being said, yes, ma'am, the Eighth Amendment in a lot of cases are being violated. And here in Texas, man, we have the individual himself who is indicating that they don't want their case tabled. And a hearing was held on that process because of the simple fact that the candidate, his statement said that the because that was mitigating factors that were not given to the psychologist at the time of certification. But if that's the case, in thousands and thousands of juvenile cases, the psychologist is missing the proper format in order to these kids are sophisticated in the process of what they did. We have a case here in Texas called Edwin Pembroke. He was a little kid who killed a cab driver, but he was influenced by another guy who was older than him to shoot the cab driver. Well, he went to the prison system, man, and he became an individual who was allowed to rehabilitate himself. This case is a national case right now. Why? Because they were trying to understand, the fact that he killed an individual behind being influenced. And this is being addressed by our lawmakers that kids are being influenced by older people to commit crimes, man. So this is our juvenile system, man. Is that our plea bargain system is allowing kids to plead guilty to a capital 2 life sentence for crimes under the Texas law of the law party that they did not commit. So even with the process of our plea process and our law party process, the Eighth Amendment is getting violated, man, in the process of the juvenile system.
So you said that they are they lawyers or legal? Do they have legal rep? You know what I'm trying to say. I'll be getting all tongue tied.
Representation.
Yes. When you said that they're not, they being coached into pleading guilty or talked into
Yes, ma'am. pleading
guilty. Do they have their lawyers or attorneys there, and do you know if their attorneys had advised them to plead that way?
Okay. If you got 5 juveniles accused of committing a crime, okay, and whoever the person is, that individual, like I said, criminal liability is not being asked here in the state of Texas, and I don't know where else. Still in the state of Texas, they don't even acknowledge criminal liability.
You have 1 minute left.
But because of that fact, man, thousands of juveniles are being represented by attorneys to keep them from going to trial to get the death. I'm gonna cut off and I'll call right back, man.
Okay, so why Cornell gonna call me back, call us back. We're gonna go to another clip. If Angela, if you have a clip.
Test that courts apply in Eighth Amendment cases to see if the nation has changed its mind about what is cruel and unusual. And in the 1989 Stanford decision, the court ruled that the juvenile death penalty wasn't unusual because so many states still allowed it. But over the next decade, an important shift occurred in our understanding of juveniles, and that shift was based on science.
The scientific community had done a lot of research on the human brain and the juvenile brain and showed that they're not like adults.
All right, so let's just get our terms straight before we get to the science. Juvenile is a legal term for people under 18. Psychologists sort juveniles into separate groups. Children are the youngest, and adolescents are making the transition into adults.
Adolescents are different from children, but yet they're not quite adults. They're clearly more mature and more capable than children, but they still don't have the full capabilities of adults.
Take a look at this. This is an image of an adolescent brain. In the 1990s, scientists undertook a long-term study on adolescents, scanning the brains of over 100 people between the ages of 12 and 25. And what they found is that not only do teenagers act differently, their brains work differently.
When we now know that the brain undergoes a dramatic series of changes during the adolescent years and into the early 20s, there are 3 main sets of changes that neuroscientists think are important.
The first set takes place in the prefrontal cortex, right here.
We think of it as the CEO of the brain. It's the brain's chief executive officer. It's the part of the brain that's responsible for all of our advanced thinking abilities, like planning ahead or thinking about the future or logical reasoning.
As the prefrontal cortex develops during adolescence and into adulthood, we get better at things like self-control, thinking ahead, and weighing risk.
A second change in the brain that takes place during adolescence involves a part of the brain called the limbic system. It's a part of the brain that's very important for our experience of emotion.
And during adolescence, our limbic regions go into overdrive.
So when we look at young people's emotions, we see that they have higher highs and lower lows. And then the third major development in the brain during adolescence has to do with connections between different parts of the brain. So the brain becomes much more interconnected.
As our brains develop, the logical calculating prefrontal cortex learns to interact better with the emotional limbic system. We learn to control our emotions better. But all these developments don't happen at the same time. Some parts develop faster than others, and this can lead teenagers to make some bad, often risky decisions.
Josh, do it now! David, try to...
They're impetuous. They're frankly not thinking.
The reason that kids take more risks than adults, we think, has to do with this mismatch between this easily aroused emotional system and the more rational self-control system. Kids may be more likely to overlook the downside of a risky decision.
And what this medical science was showing increasingly is that the key portions of the brain, which control impulses, which allow somebody to look at the consequences of their actions, in 16, 17, 18-year-olds are not developed yet. That evidence, that science really caused people to reflect, as I think the genius of the Eighth Amendment requires prosecutors and judges to do.
In other words, as we learned more about the brain, about what's normal in a brain that hasn't fully developed, the courts adjusted. Our standards of decency evolved when it came to the Eighth Amendment. Test that courts apply in Eighth Amendment cases to see if the nation has changed its mind about what is cruel and unusual. And in the 19...
They said basically the video that you just seen, wait a minute, I'm getting a lost of words now. Basically, it's saying the same thing that Cornell just told us about the juvenile, but you can also see that they did research on the brain that they're not mature when some of them do their crimes, but yet and still they say that this really touched me when I was doing my research. They said that a juvenile I'm finna to read it. I'm gonna get it for you because this one stood out more to me. So, I just Googled, I said, what is the youngest age to go to jail? And it came back, there's no minimum age for criminal responsibility. Children below the age of 14 can only face incarceration if they are proven to have enough discernment between right and wrong. Incarceration starts at the age of 14. So even under 14, they can still be incarcerated if they know right from wrong. So jump in. Cornell is back with us. Welcome back, Cornell.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, and that statistic is identifying the fact that, as we already know, that a 14-year-old kid does not have the culpable mental state to understand the idea of really right from wrong. Why? Because their minds are still trying to develop. Okay, and this is why now it has come to be proven that juvenile mind is not developing until they're either 20 years old or 25 years old, man. So under these circumstances earlier, they mentioned the fact that rehabilitation is one of the main issues to determine whether or not a come to our prison system and have shown rehabilitation and have shown that they are capable of developing. So that's the main issue within our criminal justice system for the juvenile. Can they fully develop and be law-abiding citizens in society? Well, this is the argument today. That a juvenile who committed a crime at the age of 14, 15, and 16 was not an individual who should be placed into society. Why? Because they were saying that they could not be rehabilitated. But these kids have shown different. In the case of the individual I was speaking about, he has come and shown rehabilitation. And I have seen another case where thousands of kids have shown rehabilitation in the juvenile system. But our law is not trying to acknowledge the fact of rehabilitation to come back now and change the juvenile facility laws. But these individuals not given access to have their sentences reduced. So that's where the problem's at, man.
So how do we change it? How do we direct the youth? How do we get their attention? How do we keep them out of prison? How do that's where I'm at, because when I used it wasn't no big secret. I always talked about my son. My son did some time in prison. And when I would go in there, I would see the little youngsters in there around these men, and they actually are playing like little kids. They running around, tagging each other, running, and you got the older men. They sit there and they looking at them like they think this is a playground or something, and that's how some of them are acting in there. So how do we reach our youth? How do we reach them?
Okay. Well, first of all, ma'am, a lot of individuals started learning the fact that they can take advantage of a juvenile. Why? Because adults will realize the fact that I can let a juvenile sell drugs to me, and if he get caught, he just go to juvenile. Okay? Or I can encourage a juvenile to go commit a crime for me, he's going to go to juvenile. Okay? So with this being said, man, our system needs to come to understand that it's easy to influence a child to commit a crime by a piece of candy. You can give a piece of candy that will do anything you want. So with that being said, kids are being taken advantage of. But our lawmakers are not looking at that. They're looking at the serious nature of the offense that's being committed by these kids. And now they're using these psychologists to flood the system by saying that these kids are sophisticated enough to stand tall as adults, even under the fact of the law parties, man. Because you got thousands and thousands of individual kids who never pulled a trigger. They never done anything. But they're sitting in our prison system because somebody else committed the crime. So, as I mentioned earlier, most of these kids have pled guilty under the representation. Why? Because this is what they're saying prevents them from getting the death penalty. So what's the difference between having a capital life sentence without the possibility of parole and being executed? There's really no difference, because one day you're going to die.
Yeah.
So you're being forced to slowly die as opposed to being put to death by execution. But just mind yourself, the issue is the fact that can that child be redeemed to be rehabilitated? And why come our system is not willing to give them that opportunity for rehabilitation? Our lawmakers are wrestling right now trying to figure that out.
Well,
they're kicking the can down the road 2 years, man.
Could I jump in? I think the reason why they don't want to change it because they looking at these kids as dollar signs.
Thank you, man.
They looking at them as dollar signs, and if they don't have no, okay, so we're gonna put them in a prison system programs for the men. Some of them don't have where they can get education, so some of them are self-taught. So you taking the kids away from education, and you know, so they can't get the education. So once they are released, some of them do affect door. You know, so they just look, these people are just looking at our kids as dollar signs. That's all they doing, and getting free getting free work out of them. That's it. That's my take.
We know that our criminal justice system is a multi-billion-dollar enterprise. We know that for a fact. Okay, you asked the question of how do we keep our kids from being, made victims of the criminal justice system like this? Well, we have court judges, juvenile judges. We have district attorneys. We have people who are in place to try to, teach these kids, and put these kids in a better position than sending them to a prison system to serve out a whole 40-year sentence. But what's happening is that because it's a multi-billion-dollar enterprise, nobody is willing to take that chance on trying to spend the dollars for rehabilitation, as opposed to spending the dollars to house them in these prison systems for 40 years. It takes less to house a person in a prison system for 10 years, as opposed to it takes to house a person in a prison system for 40 years, man. So this is the problem with our system. Our system is not willing to spend the dollars in the right place to rehabilitate these kids. Instead, they're spending the dollars to house them in our prison system until they die, man. And this is a very sad thing. So as of right now, they're wrestling with the fact that our parole board system needs to have some say-so in whether or not a person is convicted, is allowed to be released in 30 years, or whether or not they should be released in 40 years. Well, 2 years ago, they denied our juvenile law because of that fact. That's the only reason they denied our juvenile law, because they want the parole board to have some say-so in whether or not a juvenile is released in 30 years as opposed to 40 years, man.
Let me just it says the JJ budget was increased by nearly 100 million, aimed at planning 100 million. Shouldn't that go into the school systems? But it costs.
Yes, well, they couldn't. Okay.
It costs the taxpayers $336,000 a year to house a youth.
Oh. Okay.
And be used elsewhere to keep our youth, to redirect them, to keep them from going into the prison system. This is just my thought. I when you see the numbers, how much taxpayers are paying a year to house one youth, that's not 2 or 3 or 10 of them, is one. That money can.
Okay, with that being said, man, for anybody who's listening to this podcast tonight, man, all we can try to do is encourage people to come out, to speak up, and to have your voices heard about the criminal justice system here in the United States. Why? Because our lawmakers, our judges, our Supreme Court, they're not paying attention to the real problems in our United States. The United States is the number one state in the country that's got more people locked up in prison than anywhere in the United States. That's been identified. We have more people in our prison system than we have in our college. Which is the same as was identified. We have more people in our prison system than we have in the military, man. And this is very sad that our lawmakers are not allowed, are not being, encouraged to come and try to, utilize the dollars that taxpayers are being forced to pay the bill of housing of one individual juvenile for 1 year, to house that same individual juvenile for 40 years, when you can take that same money and build facilities in order to try to redeem these kids from committing crime. Place more facilities, more recreational facilities and education facilities in our community in order to be able to help these kids to stop committing crime. Right now, we got a judge in Berry County, Mr. Cruz. He said that he got a juvenile that he didn't know whether or not he should send this individual to prison or death or not. He was confused. He said, because this is very sad that we have these juveniles committing crimes at the rate that they're committing these crimes. And we're not excusing their crimes. That's one thing we're not going to do, and let's talk about it tonight.
No, we're not.
We want the truth, and we want accountability. So because we want the truth and accountability, we need our lawmakers to be held accountable for their actions of not taking no action at all to rebuild and reform and fix our criminal justice system. This is a problem.
Yes,
just like right now, we have a parole board system that's so out of control that they say that you have to rely on an individual on whether or not you can make parole. But where is the system that we're supposed to rely on? We're not relying on a system. So now, with that being said, our prison systems, our capital punishment places are so overcrowded that it's busting out the seams. But now, our court judges, our Supreme Court judges, and our lawmakers are not doing anything to fix our problems now. When it comes to the juvenile system, the 8th Amendment is being violated. And all we can ask y'all to do is come out, speak up, and let's address the issues about our juvenile system, the same as with our criminal justice system, the same with our parole board system. And we need to vote these lawmakers out who are not willing to stand up and do their job to try to fix the problem that they have created.
Exactly. Now, you guys know we're getting close to November 5th, that we're getting ready to vote. So if you don't get out there and vote, you can't say nothing. You cannot say now. You can't even say anything because you didn't stand up and vote. Whether you vote for Trump, whether you vote for the vice president, you have no say so. So if something don't go your way, don't say anything because you didn't use your voice to get out there and vote. So, and also when these judges are up for a re-election for the juvenile courts, vote for them. Do your research on them. Just don't go in there and just start checking off people and stuff because you tired. You didn't want to read, Jody. I know I'm voting. You got to let your voice be heard. Don't be scared. Even if your voice is shaky, my voice be shaky, it be cracking, I be stumbling over words. But you know what? I don't care. I'm going to use my voice and I'm going to speak up for the ones that don't have a voice to speak. It's a shame that Texas have over 9,000 men in prison on wrongful convictions. Look, Cola agreeing with me. He out there barking. It's a shame. It's a shame. It shouldn't be not one person. And then once they find out they didn't do it, they still got to fight another 20 to 30 years to get out. They got to fight for their freedom. While the person that actually did the crime is walking out free. We got 10 minutes. I want to get this out real quick because this been on my mind. Denver. They had it was some cases that came up, and it was public record. It was in the newspaper and stuff, where I had talked to Christopher Taylor. He'd been on the show about his crime as a youth. Then we see this. I see in the paper this guy. He committed almost the exact crime. And so Christopher asked me. He said, "Shanette, can you send it to me?" Now, mind you, I have sent in articles to them about these cases. I get a email saying that I was censored. They won't allow them to talk to me on a podcast. They can only talk to their lawyers. They cannot receive magazines in no more. They cannot receive newspaper article pertaining to what's going on. They had a DA over there, a prosecutor, and it was this. He was a guy. He was having a student shadow him, having a little boy shadow him, where the parents found some inappropriate text message from this person that had this young man shadowing him at work. So he was arrested for grooming. He was grooming a little boy. They was gonna meet up and everything. The parents wanted him to testify against them. Can somebody tell me how much time did that prosecutor get for grooming that little boy? I'm going to tell you.
Wow.
I'm finna to tell you. They gave him 2 months in jail, and he gets 5 years probation. He doesn't have to register as a sex offender. Only thing he wrong with that picture? Co-host, can you tell me what's wrong with this picture?
Yes, ma'am. That's classified above the law, first of all. That's called disparity, ma'am, within our system to identify and show favor on individuals within our criminal justice system and classify that office of the court. He committed a crime, and he done sent thousands and thousands of people to prison for life sentences, but he committed a crime and he gets only 2 months and 5 years probation. Why? Because he's above the law. And they really didn't want to sentence him. But these are the issues affecting our criminal justice system, man. Corruption, bribery, evidence fixing, crime lab crisis. All of these issues affect our criminal justice system. Okay, the same as we're mentioning these same issues, these juveniles were convicted under these same processes. So this is why we need to stand up and argue the issue that changing our juvenile system is very important, man.
Well,
because
what
you believe if
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I just wanted to say this because why? Because somebody I need to be. I want this explained to me. My Juan tried to explain it to me. Why the laws don't work for the black man and our brown brothers? Why it doesn't work for them? In some cases, it's due, but they had to fight for it. Why it don't work? But for that other, you can say that I'm being racist, but I'm not. I'm just pointing out the facts because the statistics don't lie. And if you look at if you do your research, everybody says that the black person and the brown man are the two that serve the longest time on wrongful convictions. They are, it's just all over. I'm sorry. I'm just I'm just passionate about this because
Okay.
it's not fair.
Okay.
It's not
Okay.
fair.
We have cases, man, where juveniles have been convicted by all white juries in the district court, man. I have cases of 25 individuals here, a juvenile convicted to life sentences with parole here in our criminal justice system, and each one of them, the jury was stacked against them. In one case, one guy had an all-female jury after killing a female individual. He had an all-female jury. His lawyer was a former district attorney. So this is what's wrong with our criminal justice system behind we call atrocities of our criminal justice system. And because we're not willing to fix these problems, man, we need to stand up and address them, man. We need to address our lawmakers to fix these problems, man. So with that being said, man, I want to have a minute left to tap out. But thank you people for coming on and listening to what we had to say on the Let's Talk About It show of what's wrong with our United States criminal justice system. And tonight's topic was about the juvenile process and how it works and how it don't work and how it's sending thousands and thousands of delinquent juveniles to our death rows and our criminal justice system. If you will, please come out and stand up and vote these lawmakers out who are not willing to fix our juvenile system, because this is a very serious issue. You got kids convicted at 15 having to do 40 years of their freedom and a criminal justice system, even just our appeal guilty, but there's no evidence to prove it. Being enforced by a lawyer to plead guilty, being encouraged by adults to commit a crime that they're not responsible for committing. So with this being said, please come out, stand up, and have your voice heard and vote. Please vote. Ms. Shanette, you can close out, man.
Thank you. I'm not going to say nothing after that. You done closed it out for us, co-host. I just want to just say, you guys, this is just I'm really compassionate about this subject. And if you don't have anything to say, don't say it at all. Stay in your lane. Stay in your lane and drink your water. I'm gonna drink mine, but I'm gonna use my voice though, because I'm gonna drink mine because I'm gonna get a little thirsty. So on that note, join us back here on Monday, October the 28th. We have another bonus show, so maybe we get Mr. Legate or somebody else to join us. We know we can't talk to Denver because we're censored. You guys have a good week, and I'll see you guys back on Monday.